Good evening, everybody. Wow, that was fast. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the University of Iowa Libraries. My name is John Culshaw, and it's my privilege to serve as the Jack B. King University Librarian. It's wonderful to see so many of our friends and supporters here tonight, and we see some new friends here, some old friends. We're really thrilled that you're here and took some time off of this beautiful summer afternoon to come and reminisce, learn, and converse about 6-on-6 girls basketball here in Iowa. So before we get started with this evening's program, I have just a few things that I'd like to share. It's been another busy year in the libraries. We've all reached that point in the year where we take a deep breath and recharge for the next year. So hopefully the traffic was a little better getting over here tonight. And it wasn't too hard to find parking as you were coming in. All of those things are good considering the time of year. So first of all, I'd like to introduce all of my colleagues from the libraries that are in the room. If you work in the libraries, would you stand and raise your hands? Everybody's in the back. We can have lots of collections, we can have lots of stuff, we can have great spaces, but we can't be a 21st century research library without our staff. So these people are critical to what we do day in and day out for the students, faculty, and community members. I know you're here tonight to learn about 6-on-6 basketball, but I hope you'll take a moment to go next door and pay a visit to our gallery space where we're currently sharing our Brinton Collection. The exhibit features artifacts, photos, and films from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which was a real magical era in entertainment. And you know, this is where we saw live theater, radio, and film all come together. And I think it was 3 years ago when we had Mike Zaz here talking about his collection, and Red Cedar was here playing some of the music to the silent films. Many things from the Brinton Collection are on display in the gallery. So after we're finished here, take a moment and go next door as well and check out what's going on in the gallery. The materials are part of a collection that were preserved many years by Mike Zaz from Washington, Iowa, and he's the subject of a documentary film called Saving Brinton. How many of you have seen Saving Brinton? A few, okay. So Saving Brinton is a fantastic Iowa story. And if you haven't seen it yet, there will be an encore run at Film Scene the end of this month. So we'd encourage you to check it out and learn a little bit more about Mike, learn a little bit more about these papers, and learn a little bit about the collections that we're preserving here at the UI Libraries. Over the course of the last academic year, we have been celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Iowa Women's Archives. Mary Louise Smith and Louise Noun's vision has grown into a nationally acclaimed research archive. So help me congratulate Karen Mason and all of the staff who have helped to make the IWA the special place that it is. I also want to tell you about our success in the UI Center for Advancement's recent online giving day. One Day for Iowa. My colleague Mary Reddick is here from the Center for Advancement. Many of you know Mary. So on One Day for Iowa, which was April 4th, the IWA received 27 gifts totaling almost $1,900. These gifts were matched dollar for dollar by a generous donor for a grand total of $3,746, which will be used to digitize unique audiovisual materials in the IWA, just like some of the films you were watching tonight when you came in. You can still contribute to this. The match is still open, and information on supporting this campaign is available in your programs tonight. We have donation cards in the lobby, and just be sure to make sure that you note on the gift it's for the IWA digitization project if you choose to support that. And of course, Mary, myself, or Karen would be happy to talk with you about the program. So with that, on to tonight's program. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and thank you so much for your support of the UI Libraries. And please welcome Karen Mason, Curator of the Iowa Women's Archives, who will introduce tonight's panelists.
I would have been a guard, as you can see. I'm delighted to see all you here tonight for this program that is very near and dear to my heart. As John said, we're in the final phase of celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Iowa Women's Archives. We started it out last summer, last July, with an Iowa City Feminists reunion in this room and a wonderful exhibit on the alternative press in Iowa City next door. We then followed up in the fall with an exhibit on 25 collections for 25 years. That was a hard choice to figure out what 25 collections out of the 1,200 collections in the archives to feature. So we turned it over to people who had used the archives, faculty who had taught with the collections, researchers who had written about the collections, and members of the public who had donated or used materials. And so that was, and then we had a symposium here in November, and we were exhausted by the end of the year. But never fear, we had more. There's more. So it's really been a whirlwind year, and I wanted to first start by thanking my colleague Janet Weaver, who is back here. She has been working with me in the Iowa Women's Archives. She's the assistant curator. She's been there since 2001, and together we've worked hard to build the collections of the archives and make them available to researchers. I'd also like to thank the wonderful students we've had working in the archives over the year. You see many of them wearing their Strong-Minded Women t-shirts. Strong-Minded Women Make History t-shirts. All of these events that we had last year took place in Iowa City, but as many of you know, our Iowa Women's Archives is a resource for the entire state of Iowa and beyond, and we gather the stories and the history of women from across the state. And we wanted to reach out to women in other parts of Iowa, and what better way than 6-on-6 basketball that touched all parts of the state. So we intrepidly decided to create a traveling exhibit on the 6-on-6 girls basketball, and I enlisted Susan Birrell and 2 other faculty members in American Studies, Jennifer Sterling, and Tina Parrott, who's in the back. And the 3 of us have worked on this exhibit for the last 2 years, basically, and it had its maiden voyage in Mount Vernon in March and April. And we were so lucky to learn that the Smithsonian Institution's Museums on Main Street program was visiting Iowa this year with a hometown teams exhibit on the meaning of sports to communities. And so we said, can we tag along? And these host communities said, yes, sure. And so we have our girls basketball exhibit visiting the 6 sites across Iowa where the Smithsonian exhibit will be, hometown teams. And there is a flyer in the lobby that tells where and when they will be. And at each of these sites, we're doing some collecting, hoping that people will donate materials to the archives on the history of girls and women's sport, broadly defined, not just basketball. But because the exhibit is not coming to Iowa City, we wanted to make it available to you. So we were able to reform it and get it printed, and so there's a facsimile in the lobby. I hope you've all had a chance to look at it or will afterwards. It's a really wonderful exhibit, if I do say so myself. And be sure to pick up some of the handouts in the lobby. that tell you what kinds of things we're hoping to collect for the Iowa Women's Archives that tell the story of girls and women's sport in Iowa. As someone who grew up in Minnesota loving sports but never having the opportunity to play in organized sports beyond the Summer Softball League, I was amazed when I came to Iowa and learned that girls here had been playing basketball throughout the 20th century and that they were admired for doing so rather than looked down upon as being deviant in some way. So I just wished I guess I wished I had grown up in Iowa for that reason at least. My grandmother did. She played basketball in Forest City in 1918, and her team is pictured in the very first panel of the exhibit. Before I turn it over to Susan Birrell, who will moderate the discussion, I just wanted to say that if you didn't pick up one of these notebooks with our 25th anniversary motto, "Every woman has a story, every girl has a voice," please do so and start writing down your stories that you can donate to the archive someday, okay? And now I'd like to introduce Susan Birrell, who is a professor in American Studies and Gender and Women's Studies here at the University of Iowa. She joined the faculty in 1980, and she's nationally known for her incisive work in sports sociology and the history of sport. She is co-author or co-editor of several books, including the highly regarded and oft-cited Reading Sport, Critical Essays on Power and Representation, and Women's Sport and Culture. She's also the author of numerous articles on topics ranging from Billie Jean King to the Olympic Games, and one of my favorites, given my penchant for softball, is A Diamond Forever, Feminist Transformations of Sport. She's earned national recognition for her scholarship with awards from the North American Society for Sport History and the North American Society for Sociology of Sport. Closer to home, just this year, she received the 2018 Jean Y. Jew Women's Rights Award from the University of Iowa Women's Resource and Action Center and the Council on the Status of Women for her work on behalf of women. She's currently at work on a book called Reading Mount Everest, History, Narrative, Power. It is my great pleasure to introduce my good friend, Susan Birrell.
Thank you, Karen. This 6-on-6 project that Karen and Tina Parrott and Jen Sterling and I have been involved in this past year has been a complete joy. It's been great fun to explore the material in the Iowa Women's Archive, to choose some of the artifacts and stories as we try to figure out how to tell the story most effectively, and then, of course, to see the effect of the exhibit on others. At Mount Vernon, the first stop of our 7-town traveling tour, we were met at the door before the exhibit even opened on the first day by women eager to see the exhibit and to share their own stories. We spent several hours that day talking to former 6-on-6 players from all over Iowa, some of whom brought their scrapbooks and other materials with them to donate to the Iowa Women's Archive, where they can become part of the historical record and be made available for public use. So, as Karen said, it's wonderful to be able to bring that enthusiasm for 6-on-6 to Iowa City. And it's a particular pleasure to have these 3 former Iowa girls, an Adel Tigerette, Julie Goodrich Blake, a Linn-Mar Lion, Lisa Bluder, and a New London Tigerette, Shelley Lucas, here to share some of their experiences with us this evening. Julie Goodrich Blake was an accomplished high school athlete at Adel High School in the early 1970s. She was all-conference as a softball pitcher and as a quarter-miler on the track team, and a 2-year all-conference player in the Adel basketball team that was runner-up for the state tournament 2 years in a row. As a high school player, she received fan mail, and the Dallas County News described her as a very determined girl who doesn't know what it is to quit or give up. She hadn't planned to play basketball at Iowa State, but was asked to try out, and in her second year, she was among a group of women receiving the first athletic scholarships available for women due to Title IX. She graduated with a degree in physical education and coaching, and then taught and coached at Ames junior and senior high schools. She's donated a fantastic collection of scrapbooks, photographs, publicity materials, and family papers documenting those years of 6-on-6 basketball to the Iowa Women's Archive. And our traveling exhibit featured several things from that collection. So we're happy to have you here today. In so many ways, Lisa Bluder is central to Iowa women's basketball. So it's no wonder that this year she was honored with the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union's First Lady Award. It all started at Linn-Mar High School, where she played for 4 years as a forward between 1975 and 1979. She then went on to become a 3-year starter at the University of Northern Iowa. She coached for 6 years at St. Ambrose University in Davenport, 10 years at Drake University. For the past 18 years, she's been the highly successful head basketball coach at the University of Iowa. Her teams have made 17 postseason appearances, including 13 NCAA tournaments, most recently this past year, and they advanced to the Sweet 16 in 2015. She has a .674 winning percentage over the course of her career, and she's one of only 10 active women coaches to record at least 700 victories. More than these successes on the court, Lisa Bluder sets a style of class and grace that makes us proud to say she represents our university and our state. So thank you for joining us here tonight. Shelley Lucas parlayed her 6-on-6 basketball career into a highly respected career in sport history, where she's recognized as one of the leading scholars in the field. She grew up in various towns in southeast Iowa, began her 6-on-6 career in 2nd grade in Long Grove, Iowa, and she graduated from New London High School in 1985, having starred, as she likes to tell her students, as a defensive specialist, and having never scored a single point in her career. She did her undergraduate work at Iowa State, earned her master's degree at Ohio State, and was awarded her PhD in the field of sports studies from the University of Iowa. As a graduate student at Iowa, Shelley was a graduate assistant in the Iowa Women's Archives, where she was responsible for processing many of the papers on women's sport in that collection, and she drew on that material for her dissertation, which examines the history of 6-on-6 basketball in Iowa, with a particular focus on the controversial transition to 5-on-5. She's currently an associate professor at Boise State. She's always, so we're always glad to have Shelley back to campus and to have the leading historian of 6-on-6 girls basketball on stage with us tonight. Thanks. So this is our all-star lineup together. These 3 women, their careers span the years from 1970 to 1985. And we all went to dinner beforehand and told lots of stories. So I just want to start them off with a couple of questions, and then I expect that they'll engage one another as they did over the dinner table. So I'm going to ask each of you just to comment for a minute or two just on a starter question, which is, what was it like to play 6-on-6 girls basketball in your town in your era? Shelley, why don't you start?
I will start. Thank you. What was it like to play 6-on-6 in my town? Okay, so I played in the early 80s in a very small school, New London High School, southeast Iowa. There was 37 people in my graduating class, so if you wanted to play basketball, you pretty much could play basketball. And, you know, growing up in Iowa, why wouldn't you? That's what everybody did. You played basketball, and then you did a spring sport, and then you played softball, and then you played fall softball. But for me, being an athlete was an important part of what I did. I had no idea that 6-on-6 was anything different than anyone else in the country played. I didn't know it was unusual that I never got to score any points. I took a lot of pride in my defensive skills. I mean, we hit the weight room, we ran wind sprints, you know, we did all the work and the training and wanted to win and competed. And my school was never a noteworthy school. Like, we didn't make it to state or anything like that. So we were playing because it was fun to play, and that's what you did when you grew up in Iowa.
I guess I came from the bigger school. Going to Linn-Mar, I think we had a couple hundred in our class at that point. But You know, when I was growing up, I played with my brothers all the time. And so when I went into, I think it was 5th grade, and I kept dribbling the ball, and they kept calling me for traveling, and I never understood why. You know, I was taking 3 or 4 or 5 dribbles, and I didn't understand. So I did get the hang of it, though, by the time I was in high school. And obviously enjoyed my time in high school so much. And I was really fortunate because I had a tremendous high school coach that I really looked up to, and that was, to me, really one of the reasons why I got into coaching. She was an Iowa girl that played 6-on-6 basketball that went to play in college, and I really never even thought that was even a possibility to go to college and play basketball until she came to our school as an assistant basketball coach. And she happened to be a Kodak All-American, which is one of the top 10 players in America in college. Her senior year at William Penn College here in Iowa, and went to the Final Four. And so, you know, I had this incredible influence, and really that's what got me into coaching. But obviously it was a huge impact on my life, and now I've been able to play 6-on-6 and watch the transformation and coach girls that both played the 6-on-6 game and played the 5-on-5 game and have witnessed it all. And so it's been a marvelous journey, and I'm really glad that I lived in this state and was able to witness all this.
So I'm from Adel, which was a small school, and we didn't know that across the country other girls didn't have an opportunity to play. My parents always went to the high school activities when we were little. That was their social life, and so I grew up going to the high school activities and watching, and always knowing that I wanted to play. But growing up in Adel, with the coach that I had and the success that we had, it was a whole community that got behind us, and we were treated like royalty, really, because we had so much success, and the people of the community enjoyed watching us. And I mean, it's really part of, I can't imagine my life without having had that. So I think
How about that? How about your most memorable moment in 6-on-6? And why don't we start with you, Julie, because you've been to the state tournament a couple times.
So we were lucky enough to get to the state tournament my junior and senior year. So junior year, we were ranked number 8, and we made it all the way to the finals, and we were beat by Mediapolis. One of my competitors here in the crowd beat us. They hammered on us. But it was still such a thrill to be there and get to play, and most of the team was coming back the next year. And so the senior year was more difficult because we were ranked number 1 all year. Once again, we got beat in the finals, which was very disappointing. But the memories of going to state and having that opportunity and winning, and the teammates would probably be my fondest memory.
Yeah, I never made it to state, and it's still bitter to this day. It's something I really want to do. I dreamed about it. You know, I wanted to be there, and every year we'd go and we'd watch the state tournament and see all the glamour. I mean, it was packed. It's, you know, full attendance, and then the guys would come out in their tuxedos and clean the floor at halftime, and the spotlights would come on, and they'd announce the tournament teams and the people that were being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And the whole thing was marvelous. And I just wanted to be a part of it, and I never was able to make it to the state tournament. And so I guess that's not a great memory, but it's the memory I have.
I also never made it to state. This is going to be kind of interesting, but my most memorable moment with 6-on-6 basketball is when I didn't make the team in 8th grade at Walcott Junior High, which was a much bigger school. I was on the team in 7th grade with 26 other kids. Didn't really play, so not a big surprise that I didn't make the team, but it was crushing. I mean, I still remember my mom's in the audience coming home and crying because it was a big deal. And now what am I going to do? All my friends are at practice, and there's nothing for me to do. my other memories are just, the bus rides, the camaraderie, coming home late from, driving up to Waco for a basketball game and getting home really late and having to go to school the next day. And just, the friendships were just, even going back, Susan mentioned I started in second grade, and I have a photo that I show my college students that I teach. And I don't know if it's second grade or it's fourth grade or whatever, but it's my team, Biddy basketball. I went to Allen Shepherd Elementary with Jenny and Robin. But my shirt is a dark green shirt, and my mom used white shoe polish to write my number on my shirt. And I have this picture, and I have the same hairstyle, and it just brings me back. It's just so many memories. It's just a part of who I am and part of my life as growing up in Iowa, I think.
Did any of you have parents or grandparents, mothers or grandmothers who played? No? All from out of state, huh?
My mother played, my grandmother played, my aunts played. That's why I didn't realize other girls my age weren't getting to play across the country, because it wasn't novel to go out for basketball at Adel because everybody else had played before. So
Maybe you could tell the story about the parents who were complaining because their kids lived in cities and couldn't play 6-on-6.
my friend that's here with me tonight, Deb Hazelton Roetman, so she's my friend that I met in college. We're the same age, and the whole time I'm in Adel, playing basketball and having success and fun, she's at Cedar Rapids Kennedy, and they don't have it. And so she and her parents are forming a group of people trying to petition so that they can have the sport. So, and I just found that out this week while I'm staying at their house. So, I had no idea when I was playing basketball that was going on, even in our own state and the larger schools. So it was kind of a little school game, and I didn't know that.
It was a little school and a rural school game. Yeah.
I'm gonna chime in from my academic perspective and a personal perspective. So I study sport history, and my sport history professor my first year, Tina Parrott, she's out and about here somewhere. We read a book about women's sport history, like my first month as a doctoral student, and I'm reading about this sexist 6-player game that wasn't really a real sport, and what is up with those people in Iowa who kept playing 6-on-6 till 1993, and I had no idea that the rest of the world, and it also talked about how unique Iowa was in offering competitive sport opportunities for girls starting in 1920 tournament, and then adding sports way before other people were, way before Title IX. So it was like, yay, Iowa, and then boo, Iowa, in these books. And I'm like, you know what? I was an athlete. I played, we played real basketball. I was so annoyed. That was the spark that led me to do my dissertation, because I didn't know anything different about the rules, and I was really offended that somehow, because I played a different rule type of basketball than other people, that I was less than or something like that. So that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to point out Jan Jensen.
Great.
Who is here, associate head coach Jan Jensen, and played 6-on-6 basketball and actually led the United States in scoring her senior year because she averaged 65 points a game. And it was... But both Jan and Jenny Fitzgerald, our other associate head coaches up here, are both in the Girls Basketball Hall of Fame for playing 6-on-6 basketball. But Jan's grandmother was also in the Hall of Fame. And she played in the 1920 Girls State Basketball Tournament and won it. And she was from Audubon, Iowa, and her name was Dorcas Anderson. And her nickname was Lottie because she scored a lot of points. And that was about 18, wasn't it? The score of the game was about 21 to 16, and Dorcas scored 18. And I think Jan even brought her basketball uniform.
get with you to get you to some of this stuff. But Lisa was going to be on the panel, and I didn't think they were going to bring things, but I had a lot of things in my closet. Okay. I was just saying, I thought I had a good coach voice, but maybe not. But this was actually my grandmother's uniform in 1920. And I thought I would just bring a couple things to show you since Lisa kind of gave me the segue here. So that is this. And then, ironically, I just wanted to just share this excerpt because I know your grandmother played. And Karen had written me. I wasn't originally going to be able to make it in the last minute. I could. I have a couple pictures of my grandmother here, but the main thing, you can kind of show this here. She won the state tournament in 1920 and 21. And what was kind of a cool thing to me is that, she didn't talk about it much as I was going through. But then my senior year, we made it to state, and then she happened to find her stuff. I chose to go to Drake. I played with Jenny. And this is a contestant ticket from 1920. Oh. And this was her little ticket, or I guess this one was 1921. And it was Drake University on it. And I learned in my senior year that she played at Drake University, and that this particular picture here, I can put it out front if you want. It was taken in front of the Drake Fieldhouse, of which I played. And to kind of share that history. And so I kind of found things. I've had a shrine in my home to her for years. But 97 years to the day, and Karen, we'll get together, I found one of her diaries. And it was so weird. I was reading it in March. And it was, I won't read the whole thing, but this was, kind of gives you what you ladies are talking about. It was really cool. She kind of counts everything. Can you just hold that for me, maybe there? She was about how much that you're talking about, you loved it. And those of us in the room that played. And she won the state tournament. She has a few little beautiful things. Of course, I'm her granddaughter that I like, but I'm just going to share these two paragraphs. They won the game. After the game, I cried to think it was my last game. Yes, it was just like saying goodbye to my best friend. Each of the Audubon players were awarded with a silver loving cup. I will prize and honor mine so long as I live. I'm going to show you the cup.
Wow.
This is awesome.
So I've had this cup, and on it, and I know I'm doing everything wrong, right, Karen? It's 100 years old. I have my oils on it, all of that. So we're going to talk. But it says on the front, Drake University, and it needs a little work, but I do have that piece. So I was reading it, and it was like, this is my basement. I was like, oh my goodness, I have this cup. Thank you for that. And so she goes on to recount, and then she said the high school got a big silver cup. We played in all the tournament games, and I, in parentheses, not to be boastful, played good in all the games and was honored as the outstanding star of the entire tourney. No, I am not a bit proud of the honor, but of course I was glad to get the honor. And then she goes on to explain, I won't do all of this. She said, we got to Atlantic. She's from Audubon, Iowa, southwest Iowa. And lo and behold, there was over 50 cars from Audubon to welcome us home, including a band, yell leaders, and everything. Every town we came to, we stopped and had some music, and I bet the town knew we had won the state championship. When we arrived at Audubon, the whistles were blowing, flags were flying, and the town was wide awake. And it just dawned on me, Lisa said we get a coach, and Jenny, all these young women, and there's a lot of tears at the end of a year. And to think what this state has had, for so many years. And so I brought a couple of things. I can put them out there, and Karen, you and I can talk. So Lisa, thanks for giving me a little segue to show my props. I'm so proud of my grandma.
How many people in the audience played 6-on-6? Great. Okay. So there's your role model, Jan, because she's brought all this material for the Iowa Women's Archive, and now it's going to be available for everybody to look at and to use. So thank you very much. Sure thing.
To just segue on the caravan, we rode to the state tournament in these big Winnebagos with signs, about our team, and when we went to the tournament, the town got behind the Winnebagos, and the whole town followed us all the way to Des Moines, and then when we would leave Des Moines and come back to town, and I mean, it's just so bizarre to think. At that time, we were like, wow, look at everybody's coming, and it's an interesting thing to go through. I mean, at the time, you're thinking, what's going on? The whole town, the post office closed, and everybody came, and that, to me, the whole town, even people that didn't have kids that played, were interested in what the girls' basketball team was doing. It was just extremely interesting. At the time, you didn't know, but then later, you realize, wow, that was really special.
So as part of my research, I interviewed a number of people from Montezuma High School. Anyone here from Montezuma? Okay. So back in 2003, you had a big 6-on-6 reunion. I don't know if you were there or not. Al Rabinold, if I'm saying his name right, the athletic director, put it on. And Montezuma had a very strong streak in the late 60s. I think they won like 89 games in a row, and 70. Okay.
But who's counting, right?
Yeah. 1970, 69, 70, something like that. And they, so I interviewed about 7 former players who were at the 6-on-6 reunion. And so the community thing, from what Julie was just saying was talking about, is what spurred me to talk about this. So, they advertised 6-on-6 reunion, come back, whenever you played 6-on-6. And I can't remember how many people totally showed up, maybe like 36 or 40. But they had 2 teams, like if you graduated odd years, even years. They had opened the bleachers out on one side of the gym, and so many people from the community, and even an hour away, and even from Oregon and Florida, came that they had to open the bleachers on the other side. They had DJs playing. They had people who had no kids. They just used to like to come and watch 6-on-6. So, this is well after 6-on-6 was over. After the event was over, they had, this great 6-on-6 game. They asked if they could get the trophies out of the trophy case in the school lobby. And the former players marched and did a victory lap around the gym carrying all these trophies. And all of the people that I talked to, they just talked about the community aspect, both when they were playing and the value of that reunion. And it just reinforced to them how much their basketball experience and how much 6-on-6, not just because it's not any sport that we're talking about. We're talking about 6-on-6. Not that other sports can't inspire the same kind of community, but even reflecting back now, right, when people come to the reunion, how much the sport and the support of the support and the athletes and the coaches and the chaperones, all these people that they honored, was about community. And that theme came up over and over again, even from some of the athletes that played 6-on-6 at the very end, and those that played in the late 60s. They all had similar shared experience about the power of community, around that sport. And it was amazing to me to hear them talk about that.
We talk about the transition you might have had to make from 6-on-6 to 5-on-5. And I'm kind of interested, Lisa, in your experience of going from playing 6-on-6 to coaching then 5-on-5.
Yeah, I played 6-on-6 all through high school, and then I got to college and we played 5-on-5. So I was at a definite disadvantage going in my freshman year, because the girls from Illinois played, 6 or 5-on-5 their whole lives, and I didn't know how to play defense, still don't. If you watch our teams, And I'm still not a very good ball handler, because honestly, those 2 dribbles kind of restricted you, and so. Those are some disadvantages, but man, I could shoot the ball better than any of them, because we did it over and over and over again. in the 6-on-6 game. And so, those, I think you had some disadvantages, but you also had some advantages. And you did quickly catch on, obviously, to the game. And it was different, though, when I was coaching, I had my choice of getting 5-on-5 girls from Illinois and Wisconsin when I was at St. Ambrose, or 6-on-6 girls from the state of Iowa. And quite honestly, it wasn't a big impact, I don't think, in the 80s, because I think in the 80s, girls in basketball in Iowa were playing more AAU basketball, so they were getting those experiences in the summer playing 5-on-5, so they had a little bit more heads up than we did in the 70s. And I think that, when I look back at St. Ambrose and those girls that were coming out and playing only 6-on-6, there were some really great players, and they had no problem adjusting to the 5-on-5 game immediately. Did you ever play 5-on-5?
So yes, I went to Iowa State not thinking I would play basketball. I wasn't recruited, and I was studying physical education, and I was taking a tennis class, and the head basketball coach for the Iowa State women was my tennis class teacher, and she said, "Why don't you try out for basketball?" And I don't really know. And, I had a wonderful high school experience, and I kind of figured it would be somewhat of a letdown, to be honest. And so I thought, okay, I like the tennis teacher / coach, so I went out. And I have to tell you, coming from Adel, my high school coach is here, Larry Niemeyer, but we had what I would consider a very sophisticated program. I mean, he had 6 managers. One of the managers is here tonight, but they laundered our uniform and put them in these fancy bags with Adel, and we just picked up our bag. We didn't have to get ourselves even ready. Bring your shoes, and that was about it. And so it felt really classy. So when I went to Iowa State, and the tennis teacher was the coach, and we started, I played, made the team, and then it was time for a game, and they kind of threw the uniforms at us and said, you need to go find the swimmers because we're sharing our warm-ups with the swimmers. And so you need to go get your warm-up from the swim team so that we can, and then when we got on it was just like a little van, and they said, who wants to drive? I said, well, I'll drive. So I'm driving the team to the game. I mean, if you consider that, after playing at Adel and having my uniform laundered and being treated like a queen, now I'm driving the team to the game. And so it was and then, I had played 6-player, so now I'm playing 5-player. And honestly, I don't remember, and I've talked to my teammates from college also, we do not remember running a formal play. We practice plays, and they seem kind of confusing, and we practice, and then we get in the game, and literally we would just go freelance. And I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit that, but we did not run a play the whole time in college.
So half the audience seems to have played 6-on-6, so maybe it's time to turn this over to you to tell your stories or to ask questions of any of the people up here.
Oh, okay, we're good.
I don't need a mic.
Oh, all right.
I don't need a mic. I taught PE for 41 years, and I grew up on a farm in a big family and a rotary tractor, so I've got a voice. Anyway, I was interested in what you said, Julie, about you didn't know that other states did play. One of the highlights and one of the most nurturing to my passion and my interest for the game, aside from playing it, was that as a junior in high school, we had an English teacher who absolutely required that we wrote a theme paper. And everybody complained because it had to be at least 30 pages long and not more than 40. Jeez. And they didn't know how they were going to get 30 pages. Well, by the time I got done doing the research on the history of girls basketball in the state of Iowa, I wanted 100 pages to tell the story. And that was just going to be a drop in the bucket. And I was so fascinated, not only by what I found out about the program. By the way, I knew your grandma, Jan, or I knew of her when I did my research. And so many other players as well that comprise our history. But I also learned that we were unique, that other girls didn't have those opportunities. The only state being an exception was Oklahoma. And if you want to read a really good book about Oklahoma way back when, read Girls of the Dust Bowl. It's a wonderful book.
I second that.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, there was only one school in Iowa that I knew of that played college ball, and Jareen played there down at Iowa Wesleyan. I also knew about the Wayland Queens. And like you, I played guard. My dad was really upset about that when I was in 8th grade because that was the first year I got to go out. I was a farm girl, so there were chores to be done. But we worked around that because my dad wanted me to play. And I went out my 8th grade year. I talked one of my best buddies into going out her freshman year. She had never played ball. She was the grandmother of Missy Slockett, or not of Missy, she was the mother of Missy, and the grandmother of Allie Disterhoff. And I also played with Jo. She was my teammate. And Allie's aunt was also a teammate of mine. So, there's so much connection. It's not just about the community where we play, it's about the community of players and coaches that played that game. And there's just so much passion about that. Farmers who couldn't get away from anything else got away to go to the girls' basketball game. And I have one story to tell about that, and then I'll shut up and sit down, though I could probably talk for 2 hours. My dad and Joe's dad took great pride in never missing a game, and I do mean never. They went to a game one night, and by the time we got to the bus and we took off, they were still finishing up chores for their girls who had to leave early. And the two of them got in the car together. Both of their wives tried to dissuade them from going because the weather was so bad, the snow was flying. And the way they got to that ball game was one would drive and the other would stick his head out the window on the right side and say, no, go to the left, no, back to the right, over to the left. And when he got too cold, they'd change drivers. And when they got to the gym, which was in little old Millersburg, Iowa, where the free throw circles overlapped at the center, and if you arched the ball too much, you hit the roof. And they were the only one of 3 spectators in the gymnasium that night, and the other one was the bus driver.
Thank you. Well, I'm so proud of Lisa Bluder. I had the opportunity to coach against her when she played in 7th grade. That's when Marion finally got girls athletics. And I had been told when trying to start girls athletics in Marion, I had started it at Keystone, and Jean had the opportunity to play. We couldn't use the boys' gym, but we could work out in a classroom and explain it, or in phys ed class, or maybe get in at some time, but not officially. We weren't supposed to be in the boys' gym. Yet, I have a double major in home ec and phys ed, and one of my duties, was to wash those stinky towels the boys used every week. As a home ec teacher, for whatever reason, that was part of my job. Okay. Anyway, Jean had the opportunity they had me then coach. We started softball, but we couldn't start basketball. But I coached them in the Walther League program, which is real strong in Benton County. And Jean came to Iowa and played basketball and played in the Pan Am Games. What year was that? Jean Pullman Hamill. And never played high school basketball because the boys wouldn't let us have it, the men wouldn't let us have the gym. Anyway, I am so proud of her. And then I came from a small school in central Iowa where one year in 1950, when they divided the tournament by Highway 30 and 69 through Ames, there were 4 Story County teams in the state tournament. And that was back in the years of one class. So that was pretty good. That was the year Slater won it. I used to be able to say all the teams that were in every year and what year, and recognize a lot of you here. Anyway, there were only 10 in, we have since written a book, Milford Township and Proud of It, which is just east of Ames, between Nevada, Ames, Roland, and Story City. And Roland would always beat us out, so we weren't anything as far as any state tournament. We only averaged 10 in a class in 35 years of having high school graduates. And Eb Cochran, who had played for Iowa, was our coach at this little school. He made a post forward out of me. And not to, just because of the desire to play, the highest I scored was 57 points against supposedly the best guards in 1956 that played in the state tournament and got, their brag was that they had the best guards in the state. Anyway, then to go on to a bigger school, Marion, and try to get girls athletics. I was so chastised. The superintendent called me in. I thought he was going to fire me. You're just too zealous about this girls athletics in Marion, and we're not going to have it, so just quit it. And that kind of talk. Went to the WAMAC conference meetings, and they'd say, if any of you women are here again tonight, because some of them were coaches' wives, just go home. We're not going to have girls athletics in WAMAC conference. It was a real struggle. In fact, we even moved to Springville because they finally had girls athletics, and so that my daughter would be able to play. And I am so proud of Marion, who this year had state championships in both basketball and volleyball the same year. And they've had more girls championships of Iowa, even though they're classified, than they ever did boys. But what a struggle it was to get girls athletics in these bigger schools. Then I had the opportunity, having been on the Iowa High School Girls Athletic Union Advisory Board for 18 years, I happened to have the opportunity to represent Iowa in 1978 and 1979 in Washington, D.C. for our summer meetings to determine if it was going to be 5-player or 6-player nationally. Of course, I was for 6-player. I said there's much more finesse and accuracy in the game of Iowa girls basketball. If any of you have never seen it, you're really missing something. And I was so thrilled before Johnny Wooden died. He had, and of course my thing against 5-player was, you don't want to make a girls' game a run and gun game like some of the boys' games are, because it'll not be a very exciting game. And Johnny Wooden said before he died, and that's the exact 2 words I used, there's more accuracy and finesse in an Iowa game than you'll ever see in a boys' game. And he said, if you look it up, you'll find it, that the girls have made a better high school game out of the 5-player game than the boys ever did because of accuracy and finesse. For whatever reason, girls aim at the basket and not just throw it up.
Okay, and thank you very much for your stories. I think we want to get to some other people in the audience. Sorry if I talk.
My name's Heather Heddens. I'm from Mediapolis, Iowa. We were the state champions in 1973. And that Montezuma issue, Montezuma won in 1969 and 70, and they were headed to a three-peat. And my sophomore year, Mediapolis faced them in the quarterfinals, and so whoever won that game would go on, whoever lost didn't get to play anymore. And Mediapolis won that game 105 to 104 in an overtime. And everybody says that's one of the best 6-on-6 games ever. The sentiments on the whole 6-on-6 experience, I just think that's exactly the way it is. You had so much support from your community. My best friend is here, Mallory Moore Hines. She was a cheerleader. Somehow all my really good friends were cheerleaders, but whenever we were, most of the time I would hear, but especially when it was a tight game, whenever I was at the free throw line, I'd get the ball from the ref, I'd dribble twice, get ready, and then I'd hear, make it half, and then I'd shoot. And she was always there for me to say that, so it was... But I just want to echo what Shelley said about being a guard. When you come from a class of 37, where are you going to find 5 shooters? The 6-on-6 game was so pure. It involved more women, more girls to play. Your big, tall farm girls, they were the most awesome, sturdy post players you've ever seen in your life. You had some really fast people like that, like Shelley, I'm sure that, you know. Oh, I bet you were. That could play the game, and I just think the issue with the dribbling, they dribble the ball way too dang much anymore. How much faster is it to pass the ball than to dribble the ball, move without the ball, and pass the ball? Okay, anyway, don't get me started on that. So the thing about the 6-on-6, you don't realize that we really were kind of famous, right, Julie, in our communities? I went on to dental school here. I went to the Air Force. I came back. I started a practice in Columbus Junction. I just moved there December of '86. I had just moved into my home. I'd been there 2 days. The high school principal calls and says, I hear you're back in town. Would you like to coach our girls' basketball team? And I said, whoa, wait a minute. I haven't even started my practice yet. Let me get started. And then later on, I was the assistant coach at Columbus Junction High School for 4 years, 1 year playing 6-on-6, and the next 3 years doing 5-on-5. And I felt the pain of moving from 6-on-6 to 5-on-5 with some of my very, very best athletes. That we had some awesome guards that they didn't shoot the basketball, but they were participating in sports. And I just think the whole fallacy of it wasn't fair. I don't like when you said it, it's true. People said, well, it wasn't fair and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's blah, 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 if you ask me. But anyway, and nothing would tell anything more about Mediapolis, Iowa basketball than to mention my coach, Bud McLaren. Larry, you know Bud, and he was a huge influence on my life. My parents always said, I never worried about you doing anything horribly wrong because you didn't want to displease the coach. And there was curfew and rules and regulations, and if you found out about it, it wasn't good, so you wanted to always please the coach. And he was such a great man, and he was a brilliant math teacher. And I read an article, I went through all my scrapbooks to try to donate them, but I'm not quite ready because I got to write some more things. There was a form to fill out, and there was little pages to answer these questions. I wrote 5 pages and got that turned into Karen. Anyway, McLaren was so good about just his analytical. He said, how do you come up with all these plays? And he goes, well, if you have 3 players and one person has the ball, there's an infinite possibilities of what could happen, of where the ball can go, where those other 2 players can go, and he was just, he was brilliant. Anyway, I just want to say that basketball was a huge influence on my life, and I wouldn't be who I am today without my experience of watching basketball, playing basketball, coaching basketball, and now watching basketball again. So, and quit dribbling the dang ball.
this on? One additional note of a possible 16 times that you could play on Vets Auditorium, she went there 14 times. Whoa! No, I can't do that.
So we're pleased that Julie is staying with my husband Rich and I, and we met in college playing flag football at Iowa State because she was always chasing me, I was chasing her, and we were wrestling for the flags, and that's how we met. So I'm Deb Rutland, and I graduated from Kennedy High School in 1974 when the big schools had, I participated my sophomore year in GRA. Did anyone else have Girls Recreational Association? And that's what we had. And I could have been a swimmer. I could have played golf. I could have played tennis. And there was track. And Title IX came around, and the conversation, we didn't have to battle the school board. The school board directed that girls basketball, 6-on-6, would start what would have been my junior year. But nobody wanted to coach it. So myself and several of my friends stalked Harold Wilkinson. Harold Wilkinson was an incredible man, an outstanding track coach at that time and throughout. And we said, Wilkie, we want you to be our coach. And we stalked him through the halls of Kennedy High School till the point where he finally said, I can't take it anymore. Yes, yes. And so we began my junior year. We had uniforms. They weren't quite as presented as yours were, Julie, but we had uniforms, and we traveled to places like Northeast Goose Lake. So the small schools could help teach those of us who really didn't know what we were doing out there what to do, and just slammed us every time. My senior year was our first official year where we played a full slate, and we were eligible to go to the state tournament, and I share the fact that I never played in the state tournament with many of you, but I went and was inspired by what I saw there. But I was a part of helping a forward from North Lynn set a scoring record because I was a guard. And she had one of the quickest first steps. She fouled out every guard on our team and the rest of the bench, including forwards. And we couldn't stop her. We didn't have the skills. But we were so excited to be part of the state tournament. I go to Iowa State. I aspire to become a history teacher and coach. I was telling Julie today, to get my coaching endorsement, I had to take classes in the boys' physical education department and get permission from the dean to take the coursework, which he was not supportive of, but the president of the university was. And I was allowed to take the courses, and I was able to become a coach, and I got hired in this tiny little town named Ankeny, which at the time was a tiny little town. And little did I know, I walked right into being part of I was the head 8th grade coach with Dick Rasmussen, who I know, Larry, you and Dick are very close, and he is a legendary coach. And I fell right into the lap of historical 6-on-6 basketball expertise, mentoring, community, everything I've heard you talk about, none of which I was privileged to have. But because of my opportunities with 6-on-6 basketball, I met fabulous people like Julie, for lifelong friends, fabulous people like Dick Rasmussen, who I have talked with, and he has just said, this is one of the most exciting things that's happened in my life. Sue, let's get out all of our scrapbooks and let's go back and look at them. And they are, and they're going to consider donating to the Women's Archives. So even though I didn't have that community and those generations, and my mom had no understanding of why her daughter wanted to do this, because she came from Vermont. Beautiful state, but they had nothing. But because of the opportunities that were presented, people have touched my life and have inspired me, and I'm just jealous of many of you who have all that history behind you. Thanks.
Mr. Niemeyer, would you say a few words? This is my coach, Larry Niemeyer, one of the winningest coaches in the state of Iowa in several sports, softball and basketball. I'd like to ask you the difference in coaching 6-player versus 5-player, because you won a state championship in 5-player with the Cedar Rapids Jefferson team, and you were runner-up in the 6-player with the Adel team.
It never bothered me when we made the change. I know a lot of coaches just quit. They didn't want to coach it. I enjoyed I was always a coach, enjoyed the practice more than the games, because that's the teaching part, and that's what I really enjoyed. And one thing that I hadn't been mentioned here tonight is Wayne Cooley.
Yeah.
And he was a personal friend of mine, very close to me, and probably the 3 people that had the most impact on my life was my dad and Bill Jacobson at Jefferson and Mr. Cooley. And he fought like you wouldn't believe, the stuff that he went through. And there'll never be another one like him. And it wasn't for Wayne Cooley, all the girls that played in the state of Iowa would not have all these great memories.
That's true.
I'm surprised that when Gwen said, how many people's going to be there? I said, I don't know. 6-on-6, this is such a good crowd. And, you know, I remember when I went to high school, and high school is such a precious time. I went to college, and I remember very few people from my college, but I remember about everybody that I went to high school with. And I know when Frosty Mitchell, when they had the sock hop, and I don't know, it's just being Wayne would always say the Iowa girl. And when he had a cover girl for the girls tournament.
For the program,
yeah.
The cover girl.
One year he had a girl from Rolling Story. So Wayne was very particular. He wanted to be sure that he had the right type of a kid. So he found out that she was worked at the pool. She was a lifeguard. So he went out and parked in a parking lot for 2 hours and watched her. Because he wanted to be sure that he picked the right girl.
Like wholesome, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far as technique of coaching between the 5-player and the 6-player, was there a big difference?
Well, I thought it was interesting what Lisa said, because 6-on-6 kids shot better.
Yeah.
I mean, and they shot better than boys.
Mm-hmm.
And when we went to the smaller ball, it made a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I know one night when I was still coaching, somebody had put the bigger ball, the boys' ball, in the basket, and the officials always came over and got the ball out of the basket. Well, we played a half with the boys' ball, and the score wasn't very good.
Yeah.
But Wally Horn, who's a senator from Cedar Rapids, is the guy that made that happen. I mean, Wayne didn't have a choice about that.
The smaller ball.
Yeah, he made that happen. Yeah. So, well, I could talk forever. And Dean Rove, who's the coach at Redfield, he would have, I don't know, he passed away now, but he had 6-on-6 games in Southwest Iowa for, I don't know, many years. I mean, I don't know how he organized them, and they drew out big crowds and everything. I mean, he quit. He did not want to coach 5-on-5. But, you know, I didn't feel that way because I just enjoyed coaching kids.
Right.
And when you can work with kids that are that young, and I mean, I had the best job in the world for 50-some years.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say as far as playing, I would have played no matter what the rules were. I mean, we wanted to play. That was, yeah.
Okay, very briefly, I played at Perry in the mid-'60s, and we went to state 3 years. We got beat out first round every year, but we went, and it was an amazing experience. But I was curious if anybody besides myself that's here tonight played the transition game, the roving forward, roving guard. So it ended up being 4-on-4. Yeah, because we've talked about 6-player, and we've talked about 5-player, but when I went to UNI, there wasn't a girls' basketball team yet, which was very disappointing. But I ended up playing AAU basketball with the roving forward, roving guard, and it was so you literally could run the whole length of the floor if you were the rover. So there were one roving forward, one roving guard, so it was always 4-on-4. And it was an amazing game. It was a transition game, but because there wasn't any basketball at UNI, I was a physical education major, and we had to check out a basketball from the matron of the equipment room to practice. And then we had a coach who lived in Union Witten, Denise Long. Denise Long used to rebound for us when we practiced in Union Witten. She was a little girl, and she would rebound for us while we were practicing. But we had a sponsor. I still have my uniform. It was a Vigor Tone feed company that sponsored us with these bright red jackets that said Vigor Tone. So anyway, I just was curious, who else played the transition? Yeah, it was pretty fun. Okay. That's all.
Well, thank you. But, you know, there's a home for that uniform now.
I think it was 85, wasn't it, Larry? 1985, 86, around that time. The basketball changed from, I think it was 1985. Reduced 1 inch.
Of the white basketball. There was a period of time we played with a white basketball.
I don't remember that one.
That was before your time.
Yeah.
Any questions for the panelists or more stories? We're getting ready to go over to the, yep.
Hi, I'm
Great.
Adel Lucas, Shelley's dad. And 50 years ago, I taught at Davenport Assumption, and we used to host a tournament. The big schools, Clarence, Loudon, Calumet, Wheatland, Bennett, and I'll never forget, the gym was full all the time. But the one game, here comes this team, and this town is coming, everybody's coming in buying tickets, and well, you guys got beat out. You know, you weren't even in. No, their girl was shooting free throws when we used to have the free throw contest. And there'd be 2 or 3 girls, and you talk about accuracy, they'd have to shoot 25 free throws, and they'd make every one of them. And it was just amazing. But how everybody followed, all these towns. They were shut down, everybody came to Davenport, so thank you.
I have a son. I would like to ask the panel how you experienced the media. This is a current topic, but my sister was a star. She graduated in '48, and the Des Moines Register covered her competition with another woman or another girl in another town. And I wondered how long that continued, if you each had media coverage.
So I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. Like, what was it, my experience as a player with media coverage?
Or you talked about community, talk about media coverage for girls.
Sure. I'm not probably the best panelist to answer that for my own community because we just weren't very successful. But I will say one very short snippet and then let them. Before Wayne Cooley took over as the executive director in I think 52, if I'm not mistaken, the Des Moines Register and the Des Moines Tribune paper those sports writers put on the tournament. So part of the reason the success of girls basketball is because it also helped sell their papers. And they were very successful tournament organizers. So there was this unique connection. And then Cooley came in and he was like, yeah, you guys are you're not organizing anymore. There's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. But I'll let Lisa and Julie.
I mean, I don't think the newspaper coverage was great when I was in high school for girls athletics, and when I went to UNI, it was certainly terrible. No, it was just almost non-existent. They didn't even care that we were playing, really. And so obviously it's grown a lot now, but we're still, fighting battles all the time to try to get more publicity for our women's basketball, team to this day. So I think it's an ongoing battle. It's something we always have to be conscious of, but it certainly has gotten better over the 30 years that I've coached.
We actually did have quite a bit of coverage, didn't we? I felt like we did. We were close to Des Moines, and we were successful. And Randy Peterson was the beat writer who came to Adel and did a lot of articles about our team and sports in general. And Jack North at the Union wrote a lot about the girls' basketball, and then Adel, we had a unique experience when we were seniors in that the MBA wanted to do a special, they had heard about this Iowa girls basketball and the different rules, and they wanted to do a clip and run it at an MBA game about the Iowa girl basketball. So this young man, 33-year-old man from Los Angeles, who actually grew up in Sioux City, came to the tournament and, unbeknownst to the team, wired up Mr. Niemeyer during the entire tournament and took all this footage. And I think a couple of reasons why he picked our team, and we were supposed to win, number one, and then we were close to Des Moines, so he could get out to the community and do the filming. So that was a national coverage that we got as a team that senior year. And he said the film was better because we lost, but of course we didn't really agree with that. So we actually did, but maybe it was because we were close to Des Moines. Yeah. I don't know.
The tournament was at least the finals. They were on like Minnesota, Illinois, everywhere, because I met people that then in college, so I saw you play ball. And then there was always, I have huge scrapbooks, don't I, Karen, of all of the clippings from the paper. And just a interesting note, at the end of our 1973 game when we won, Jim Zabel interviewed me, and he says, and Heather, what do you think about this? And he goes, whack, and hits me in the face with the microphone. And I kind of stepped back, and I'm laughing, and later on my friends would say, why were you so giggly on TV? I said, well, Zabel hit me in the face with a microphone, whatever. Anyway, so we had coverage.
Jim Zabel was a big advocate for the girls' basketball. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to thank our panelists for pretty interesting stories, and thank you all so much for coming and bringing these stories to us.
Excuse me, but there's going to be a movie out about the 1956 state championship team, which is Maynard, and then they became West Union. And West End. And Linda Nicholson and her sister Carolyn are in that. And Carolyn's son did not know that his mother had played basketball, and in her dying days of cancer, wrote a book about Maynard 8 miles, which means 8 miles from Oline, which was where his dad played, and then played for University of Wisconsin. Anyway, the writer of this movie is the same person that wrote Rudy and the Indiana Hoosiers. So it'll be a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take one more comment, and then we'll...
Iowa Public Television, a few years ago, had a documentary on 6 on 6. That was the biggest selling documentary in the history of Iowa Public Television.
Wow.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, everybody.